All right, we're going to get started with our next panel, which is Unlocking the Winning Playbook, Driving Innovative Sports Marketing Strategies. And I'm going to turn it over to Craig Dato.
All right, thank you, Robert. Appreciate it. Welcome to the 1015 panel. My name is Craig Dato. I was in the racing business for 30 years, the first 10 as the Vice President of Marketing at Santa Anita Park, where I got to work with Robert Hartman for 5 years. Robert, yay, that's why I'm here. Then I moved on to Del Mar, where I was Executive Vice President for 20 years. I retired from racing 3 years ago to start my own sports media company in the sports wagering industry. So I'm glad to be back. It's fun to be back here at the Lowe's. We've got a great panel today. I will briefly introduce who they are and then give longer introductions as they speak. We've got Dave Almy, who is the co-founder of ADC Partners. We've got Nikki Berry, who's the multimedia operations and brand manager of Arizona Sports Enterprises. And then we've got Megan Bell, who's the SVP Consumer Revenue and Insights of the LA Chargers. And we're going to start with Megan. And Megan, her job is a very interesting one in that she's got an abundance of experience working in professional sports and data and analytics. But think about this. The Chargers started in San Diego in 1960. And then back in 2017, they moved to LA. And you're a marketing person there. New market, new fan base, very interesting, unique situation. And I'm sure she's going to talk about it. I know I'm going to have some questions about that. She's been with the Chargers now for 6 years. During that time, she's helped them create their database and infrastructure. She's built their fan database, and she's also brought in and developed a membership services team, a ticket sales department, and a premium sales team. Megan, take it away.
All right, thanks for having me today, guys. So I'm with the LA Chargers. I started right after they moved from San Diego to they played at a soccer stadium of 20,000 people before SoFi Stadium opened in 2020. So when I started, one of the things that I was tasked with was, what do we do? We know we're moving up to LA. It's close, but it's far enough away where we would have to kind of figure out who we're targeting, who's buying tickets. We had to sell tickets for a soccer stadium as well as SoFi Stadium at the same time. How do you kind of balance what you need to focus on when everything seems so overwhelming at first? So, I think one of the things that we kind of took out of this was, how do we set up something that would allow us to grow for the future and allow us to test and learn our understanding, our learnings. And so for me, what that means is really starting at the base level and breaking everything down. So we had millions and millions of people in our database, but we didn't really know where they were from. And so for me, I know some people look at it as like, hey, we've got 50 million people here with their email addresses, but I know nothing about them. I didn't know where they came from. And so what I did was if you didn't buy a ticket from us, then I just deleted you from our database. If you were important and seemed like somebody that would be a fan in the future, I knew we'd get you back down the line. So with that, I think the biggest thing for me was thinking about what would allow us to really identify who these people are. So yes, email address is important. Location obviously is incredibly important for what we're doing. And understanding where they came from. So did they buy a ticket? Did they enter a sweepstakes? Did we get them from something from the NFL? And so those were really the three key things for starting it, so that it wasn't so overwhelming and trying to decide, what do we do with all of this? So again, my background is database management. So I built a database for a couple other sports teams and then went out and did some consulting on my own. And again, what I learned was it doesn't really matter what system you're using. I've always used Salesforce, but it doesn't really matter what system you're using. It's really the thought behind what you're building. And so if you're putting bad data and systems together in Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics or HubSpot, it doesn't really matter. You're not gonna be able to do anything useful in the long run. So for me, what I like to do is I spend a lot of time with stakeholders. What do they want? What are they trying to get out of it? For ticket sales, we had two different things we were trying to do. We had a group of people that were selling tickets to the $20,000 or 20,000 person stadium. And then we had a second group of salespeople who might be talking to the same people that were trying to sell the future in a stadium that wouldn't be played in. Well, at the time we didn't know it was gonna be 3 years, but it was 2 years. And so how do we set that up in a way that allows us to track every interaction, build upon the information that we already know, and allows for easy day-to-day management from all of the users, whether it was, you know, the sales and service team who was calling these people every day, or starting to build on what we know about these people so that we can work with the corporate partnerships team to help identify who our fans are to go out to brands and to other companies. So then, you know, once you have the infrastructure in place, the next is how do we find people? And if it wasn't by selling tickets necessarily, we really focused on 3 different things. So we spent a lot of time coming up with sweepstakes, you know, if high value sweepstakes, which were more, you know, autographed jerseys or tickets to games or season tickets, things that we knew you'd have to be a fan of the Chargers to really care about and wanna put your name into the hat for it. So focusing on those things rather than more generic pricing, so that we knew there was some affinity to the Chargers with that. So getting those names in the database and figuring out if, you know, kind of what the connection was there. Spent a lot of time with social media, figuring out what was the best message, a lot of testing. You know, lookalike audiences were huge as we were starting to, you know, the algorithms that figured that out on social media were way ahead of where we were building anything internally. So a lot of the lookalike audiences were huge for us to kind of grow that database. And then events. We did a huge event at the Santa Monica Pier. We did just a lot of things around LA and Orange County at the time, to really find people that were, and attract people that were interested. And so large events so that we could get, you know, those thousands of people in there. So just a couple different ways that we could engage with people to get them into our database to start to learn more about them. Then now, a couple years down the road, you know, I still say this is our 3rd season with fans, but that's really only 30 data points that we actually have to look at. So, you know, outside of attending games, what are the things that attract people to the Chargers? And one of the things is we have an incredibly engaging content team who takes a lot of risks and really makes fun of ourselves and is really big on trends and kind of keeps up with everything. So, you know, how do we capitalize on what they're doing to promote what we need on the ticket sales side and to attract new fans? So understanding, you know, some key demographics. I think, you know, the NFL the last 2 years has seen an uprising in female fandom from one particular person. So how do we, you know, we've got a lot of new eyes on us. How are we creating content that attracts females to games, that are spending money, that are, you know, open for fandom, really? So, you know, catering our content where they are, but putting kind of some ticketing messaging around that. You know, our younger fans, because our content tends to be very trendy and engaging with, you know, on TikTok or other media where you'll have younger fans, you know, making sure that our ads are talking to the people in the places that they are. And, you know, playing around with the static messaging versus videos and making sure just because we create something for LinkedIn, we're not using the same thing on Instagram stories. So really being able to break down our different segments of people and targeting them to where they are instead of just coming up with an overall ticketing message and thinking that everybody wants to see the same thing. So now that we're a few years down the road, we've got these insights and learnings, and we can really promote across all of these channels in the way that we feel like that people are responding to. And really, all of it, I say all the time, is all of it's a guess. And so we just have to be as educated of a guess as we can be based on the data that we have, and be willing to say, hey, this didn't work, and move quickly, and really take risks. So yeah, we're hopefully playoff bound, and moving through, in a really exciting time here. So we got a long way to go, but I'm really excited about where we're going and the team of people we have around us.
I've got a question for you in your unique marketing situation. If you're in Philadelphia, you were born an Eagles fan. If you're in Buffalo, you were born a Bills fan. If you're in LA, you were not born a Chargers fan. You don't have a built-in multi-generational fan base. Did you guys ever consider marketing to fans of opponents to fill the stadium, or did you say, hell no, we need a home field advantage?
No, that's not something that we want to do. We're building a fan base. And so, a lot of the things, it's not even that people weren't born Chargers fans in LA. It's that most people in LA are not from LA, so they're there. And yes, there's visiting team fans that come into play, and we'll sell. We're selling our tickets to them, but it's hard to identify, right? Because everybody's already living in LA, so it's hard to identify which teams they're a fan of. But the position that we took with that is, when you're coming to a Chargers game, we want you to have the best experience you can have. And so maybe you are an Eagles fan, but you live in LA now, and so you're cheering for that team. And, we want to give you that experience that maybe that one day a year you're cheering for the Chargers, even though you're that Eagles fan the rest of the time. And, we're starting to really see that, especially with the younger generation. You see, a lot of people either with one Chargers jersey, one Eagles jersey, or you'll see the parents in the Eagles jersey, but the kids in the Chargers jersey. And so it's really being able to identify that and grow that fan base and understanding, right? Like, it takes time. There's a lot of, there's other NFL teams there, but there's also a lot of other sports teams there. And so what can we do to focus the fandom on what we're putting out there and capitalize on what we have?
Got it. So we will take questions at the end. So if you have any other questions for Megan, let's hold them. We'll take them at the end. I'm going to move on to Dave Almy. Dave has over 30 years experience advising leagues, teams, and sponsors and organizations on essential sports business issues. We're talking clients like the Golden State Warriors, the Memphis Grizzlies, the Cal Bears, Stanford Cardinal. He's legit, and we're really lucky to have him here today. His work has included relocating franchises, finding naming rights sponsors, and developing sales training for university athletic departments. Dave is also, and he's going to have a shameless plug later, the host of an award-winning podcast, Sports Business Conversations, and he serves on the advisory board for the University of San Francisco's sports management program. He does have one notable horse racing highlight. He was at the Kentucky Derby 2 years ago, and the woman behind him had a $1,000 bet on Rich Strike and won $80,000 and proceeded to spill her entire beer all over Dave. Sorry, Dave. Our fans get excited. With that, I'll turn it over to Dave.
Thank you very much. And that was not just my probably biggest horse racing highlight. I think that might be my biggest sports highlight. When somebody behind you gets so excited they spill beer all over you, you know you're in a good event. And I'm going to take one sort of overarching statement from what Megan just said about the presentation I'm about to lay out in front of you, is that this idea of taking risks and testing applies to just about every facet of sports marketing today. Never more so, because the competition for attention and eyeballs is probably as fierce as it's ever been. So to that point, I just want you all to know that the average attention span for a goldfish is 9 seconds. That's it. That's pretty much the presentation right there. The average attention span for a human is a little over 8 seconds. That's not great, particularly for what we're trying to do, right? It was 12 seconds just 10 years ago. So what happened? And I'll give you 2 guesses. Who wants to shout it out? What happened? Everybody's holding up their phones. Yeah, it's smartphones and social media. How many of you have teenagers? Okay, how many times have you looked at them when they're on their phone and said, that thing is destroying your brain? You know what? You're absolutely right. It is destroying their brain. So there's 2 things to consider, 2 parts of the brain that are focused specifically on the ability to maintain focus. They are the ACC and the PFC. And I'm not going to try to say the words that those are because I haven't had quite enough coffee to be able to get through anterior cruciate ligament or whatever that thing is. Those 2 parts of your brain, like I said, are specifically focused on helping you keep your focus and maintain your attention. And there are studies that have shown that the use of your smartphone and the use of social media decrease the gray matter in those 2 specific parts of your brain. So we are, indeed, making ourselves dumber through the use of social media and our smartphones. Now, I'm pretty sure that not all of you are here to hear a study on neuroscience and everything like that, and I would be the last person you should ever turn to provide you with any kind of information related like that. But what the point here is, that as our brains get rewired, we're not just talking about, oh, different habits, or we think a little differently. We are rewiring the way we think. And that means that fandom specifically is also changing. How people engage with the sports they love and what they expect from the sports they love. So that's what, as we as sports marketers start looking at, and as we look to the different teams and how we try to reach different fan bases, realizing this, that at a fundamental level, people are changing in the way that they want to absorb and engage with their sports underlines and underscores everything that we do. And here's some examples. 84%, okay, that's the number of people over the age of 35 who prefer to watch a live NFL game over highlights. If you're under 35, that number drops to 52%. Right? Just give me the 12-minute highlight reel. I don't want to watch the entire 3-hour game. If you look about what people are doing while they're watching sports, right? If you're over Gen A, so millennial and up, you're doing a couple of other things. You probably ought to watch sports. You have your phone out, or maybe your laptop's on your lap, or you're doing something else. That's the degree to which Generation Z is multitasking while they watch sports compared to older generations. Again, attention spans shorter, more distracted, multiple things going on at the same time. So what this means is fandom is changing. A new fan is digital. I was going to say digital first, and it's kind of like even the wrong thing to say. It's like digital only, right? Everything is looked at through the lens of how it can be captured, shared, remixed, retooled, and re-forwarded in a digital environment. That's the world that people live in, young sports fans today live in. They're distracted, always looking for the next thing and demanding. They don't just want new experiences. They want to be able to control those experiences. What can I do to shape the outcome? What can I do to own it a little bit and share it with my friends to be able to showcase what I'm doing? Because everybody showcases their regular life on Instagram, right? Right, not so much. So this is how other sports are approaching this moment. Major League Baseball introduced the pitch clock, right? Try to shorten the games. People are distracted, right? So the most traditional sport probably of them all introduced this rule change. It dropped the time of games by 22 minutes, and the average age of a Major League Baseball fan dropped 4 years, from 48 to 44, since they instituted this one change. All right, so pretty dramatic. The NFL, the No Fun League. Now, I put that line in there before I knew that a representative from a team was going to be sitting to my right. Apologies. But sometimes the NFL isn't exactly known for being fun, right? You know, all the rules and things like that. But they partnered with Nickelodeon to have augmented reality broadcast. And their viewership numbers from people under the age of 17 went up by 5 or 6%. 70% of parents said they'd like to watch that game with their kids. And the most used term on social media related to this game was fun. So maybe it's fun after all, right? So that's how the NFL is trying different things to engage people in new ways. Does anybody know who this is? Okay, so if I say the name Jesser to anybody in here, does anybody know who Jesser is? Well, the NBA's partnered with him, gave him exclusive access to the finals because he's got 22.5 million YouTube followers. Who are the influencers that can help move the needle for your properties? Because I'll tell you what, traditional media, not going to be a thing, or at least not in the way it looks right now for much longer. People like this, people like Jesser, are reshaping what media looks like and how teams and leagues can interact with it. And lastly, look at horse racing. Here's from our partner SME and the setup they did at the Belmont. Right? Here's an opportunity for people visiting to go to a high-end hospitality thing, take pictures, because like I said, who puts their regular life on Instagram? Everybody wants to make sure they're putting a certain filter over their day-to-day experiences. So these are just some of the things that existing leagues and organizations are doing to try to test ideas, to take risks, to try things to see how they might work with younger fans. So some takeaways. And the order of these got all screwed up. I don't know. I blame my 13-year-old who made this PowerPoint presentation for me. The first thing is snack-sized entertainment, right? What is a strong, short, consumable bit of entertainment that you can add to your properties that's going to engage people? Something small, something quick, something fun. Who are your influencers, right? I mean, who are the influencers in your markets? And how can you bring them to your facilities to be able to create unique experiences? Put them on a horse, let them run around. I don't know what it's going to be, but anything that's going to look good on video is what you want to be thinking about and who those people are. Sometimes the race isn't the focus, right? The idea that someone is going to sit in a seat for 3 hours, watch a series of races, or a football game, or a basketball game is kind of a thing in the past. People want to move around. They want to meet people. They want to share experiences. They want to see different things while the game is going on. So maybe the game isn't the focus, but what's going on around the game provides a number of ways for you to engage with people. Frenetic spectator engagement. What are the gaps in your schedule that you can fill with something engaging or entertaining or interactive? And lastly, unique experiences. What can you deliver for people that they never been? I went to Churchill Downs 2 years ago, and I got to go in the tunnel from the paddock to the racetrack. Right? It's a tunnel. It's one of the coolest things I've ever done. Right? But you guys are at your properties all day, so you kind of lose track of what's like meaningful to people or like crazy to people, like those kinds of things. All right. And lastly, quick plug, that's the podcast. If anybody wants to follow, you can just click your camera on that right now. We cover a lot of different topics that you might find valuable or useful. We talked to a lot of people who are leading and shaping the sports business world today. So thanks for that. Thanks for your time.
So Dave, You didn't clap for Megan, that's not right. All right. So Dave, you mentioned getting younger fans. Who, in your opinion, is doing which teams or leagues are doing a particularly good job of engaging younger fans, in your opinion?
So it's a great question. I had actually on the podcast.
Yeah, it's a great question. You told me to ask it.
Well, that's the one I told you to ask.
Yeah.
So, well written, and even better vocalized. I couldn't have said that better myself. You know, I've talked to a couple people who work in big leagues, and one of the things that they really enjoy doing is looking at, we're in this sort of golden age of startup leagues, right? There's all these new sports that are coming online, professional women's hockey, you know, professional lacrosse. These sports all have the advantage of being able to build from the ground up and try new things, right? They start with digital, right? So a lot of established leagues, they're always looking towards these new leagues that are really just getting started and rolling, and they get the flexibility to try new things because they know they have to compete differently than some of the larger ones. I think the UFC does a phenomenal job because they know exactly who their fan is, right? And they market and drive their programs directly towards that.
If tracks were to take a shot at engaging younger fans than they currently have, what are some of the potential pitfalls, or some of the concerns you might have about that?
I think that the biggest challenge to all this is tradition, right? And horse racing, I would use baseball as an example of like, the most traditional sport, but horse racing has so much tradition to it, right? And the expectation about, but this is the way we've always done things, and this is what people expect when they come to the track. This is a time where you throw rocks through glass. Like the ability to test and take risks and things like that, this is the time to do it. So I would say that like that connection to the past is always going to be valuable from a historical standpoint, but the ability to blow things up a little bit, that's the biggest challenge.
I don't think racing's traditional at all. I think the measuring distances in furlongs is going to make a big comeback.
I'm hoping we can bring the fathom back as a popular measurement too.
Okay. Good. Well, thank you very much. Again, we'll have time for questions for David at the end. We're going to move on to Nikki Berry, who is the Multimedia Operations and Brand Manager for Arizona Sports Enterprises. Now, for those of you not from Arizona, Arizona Sports Enterprises is under the umbrella of the U of A Athletic Department, where they own all their own multimedia rights for all of U of A athletics. So she basically represents all the sports for U of A. Obviously, football and men's and women's basketball are the most visible sports, but Nikki and her team touch virtually every sport at the university. So although Nikki works for U of A and she'll walk around, rah-rah, wear U of A buttons and say bear down and all that stuff, I think what we all know is that Nikki went to University of Alabama. She got her undergraduate there, she got her MBA there, and she asked me if instead of talking about marketing today, she could make a passionate and analytical argument using charts and graphs and maybe a little bit of regression analysis of why Alabama got completely screwed by the college football playoffs and why they should have been included instead of both SMU and Clemson. You ready?
I've had extensive conversations with my father, so I just don't think I'll bore you with that. And I will start by saying I'm feeling a little bit targeted by Dave's presentation, but that's okay. As a social media kid, I guess you could say. Thank you, Craig. So I grew up in Connecticut. I went to the University of Alabama, got my undergrad degree in marketing, my master's in sports hospitality. I was fortunate to get a job at the University of Missouri where I worked in marketing, and then I started to oversee the creative department, and about 6 months ago, I ended up in Arizona. So today I'm going to talk to you guys about 3 things that I think relate to driving innovation in sports marketing. So the fear of missing out, creating unique experiences, and then not reinventing the wheel. So FOMO. Dave and Megan kind of touched on a lot of the different things, but in sports nowadays, it's not just about the game. It's not about what's happening on the court. It's about the experience. And so we're seeing more and more that the actual play itself isn't driving attendance. we see the younger demographics, and we just see with technology, whether it's social media or TV or being able to watch the highlights, people aren't attending things because, well, I can watch it on my phone. I can sit at home, I can save money drinking whatever I want to drink, eating whatever I want to eat. I don't have to spend money on a ticket, and I don't have to leave my home. So we now need to create these grander experiences to create this FOMO, this fear of missing out. So we have 3 categories of fans. You have the diehard fan that's always going to attend. It doesn't matter what you do. You're going to have the fan that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you do, they're probably not into sports. And you have the casual fan. So what are we doing to capture that fan? And I think it's with influencer marketing, or it's these experiences that you can capture that casual fan and bring them in. So again, we always talk about the driveway to driveway experience. What are you doing from the time that someone leaves their house, maybe even earlier, from the time that someone purchases a ticket, leaves their house, gets to the event, enters, buys food, buys drink, watches the actual event that is occurring, and then leaves? How are you creating that experience for them? And so I think it's just thinking about, what are we doing? Is it the tailgate experience at a football game? Is it the idea of everyone coming to the sporting event and wearing the same color? Or what is it to make people feel like they're part of something and that they belong? That's what fans love. So when you think of, Dave talks about the Kentucky Derby, it's not just the race, which is roughly 2 minutes. It's that you're going to hang out with your friends all day, and you're going to dress up, and you're part of such an elaborate event. And it's not just about the race, which yes, is so incredible, but it's thinking about what hat you're going to wear. Are you going to be able to get a drink? Are you going to hang out with your friends and socialize and do all of those things? You're in the creating unique experiences. Again, it goes back to this fear of missing out. Think outside the box, take chances, and try something new. We oftentimes get scared to try things, and I think Megan kind of alluded to this on, sometimes you have to take a risk, and then you have to evaluate whether it was successful or not. And if it's not successful, then you pivot and you may laugh about it and move on. And if it is successful, then you created something really special. I'll use a great example. We have a coworker here at Arizona. I worked with him at Missouri. He wanted to do a TikTok challenge at one of the Missouri football games with the mascot. It's called the tortilla slap. So he bought all these tortillas, and he lined up all these students in the middle of the football game. They all had water in their mouth, and the mascot went and slapped everyone with the tortilla. Well, everyone booed, everyone put in the surveys how it was so terrible, and no one loved it. But guess what? Everyone talked about it for months and months and months, and I still make fun of him to this day about the tortilla slap. So it was a failed experience, but he went on TikTok. He was trying to be innovative. He was trying to do something new. So you can't fault someone for trying something that people still talk about to this day, and everyone who was there had that experience at that football game. Taking the chances, trying something new, don't be afraid to do those things. Jump around. You think of Wisconsin. If you ever heard the story about jump around, well, it didn't start anything more than the team needed some entertainment and needed some energy. Someone asked 3 linemen, well, what's the song you would love to hear at the football game? And they said, well, let's think about it. And they thought about it, and then they said, well, why don't you play jump around? And at the right moment, at the right time, in a Wisconsin football game all those years ago, they played jump around, and the whole stadium went crazy. It's sometimes about the moment being right, and what you're doing has nothing to do. It could have been any other song, but because they played it at the right time and the right moment, they created that unique experience that now no one else experiences the same way unless you go to a Wisconsin football game. We always talk about not reinventing the wheel, and I think that Dave pointed out several different things that leagues and stuff are doing that are very unique. Now, we get scared of, oh, we can't copy this person because then we're taking their idea. And we're not really creating anything that out of the ordinary. So sometimes it's looking to what the NFL is doing, or looking to what, Formula One is doing, and how are they engaging with influencers, or how are they engaging with their audiences and creating that experience, and what can you then make applicable to your area. So we oftentimes will look at what, again, Formula One, how are they engaging? It's an up-and-coming sport. It's all these things. You see more and more young people. The largest growing demographic for Formula One is 15 to 24-year-old girls. Why? What are they doing? How can we then bring that in to the sport that we're talking about? How can we make it applicable in racing? All of those things. Well, they're engaging with influencers. We talk about the social media side of things. So what can you do to bring in influencers to your area? Or how are you marketing like the Chargers are on social media, and what are you doing? We're all on social media. We're all doing these things. You hear Dave's numbers on how the demographics are changing, so don't feel like you can't take an idea of what someone else is doing. The NBA is doing X, Y, and Z. How do you take that and make it applicable to whatever you have going on? And hey, we all steal ideas. It's how the world goes round in the sports industry. So don't be afraid to look around to those that, what they're doing, find an idea you like and make it applicable to you. If I can leave you with 3 things kind of to take away, it's what experiences are you creating? It's what are you the absolute best in? We always talk about, what are we going to be the best in? Are we going to have the best hot dog in all of college football? Are we going to have the best tailgating experience? Are we going to have the best way to purchase tickets? Whatever that thing is, figure out what your best is and be the best at it. And then what are you seeing others do that you can take and make really great within your own scope?
Awesome. Okay, so I've got a question, and Megan, I'd like to hear from you, your answer on this as well. Very easy to market a team that's in the Final Four or is in the college football playoffs. Sorry about Alabama. What do you do when your team's not very good? Start with you. You're rolling, Nikki. Start with you.
I think it goes back to you can control what you can control. One thing that we cannot control is the product on the field. As much as people may scream at us and say, or call into the admin line and say, why aren't you winning? That's not how this works, unfortunately. So I think it's, again, going back to what can we be the best at? We're going to have the best customer service because I can control that. We're going to have the best food that possibly is at a sports venue because I can control what goes in the concession stands. The tailgating experience, those are all things that you can control. So I think you have to somewhat divert the attention and say, we can't control what's happening on the field, but you had a great time because you pulled up and parking was great and you got to, have beers and eat with your friends in the tailgate lots, and then you got to go into the game and it was a great experience on the inside. Maybe the play wasn't what you expected, but then when you left, there was, limited post-game traffic. So it's controlling the controllables, and it's not always controlling what's on the field, but everything else around it.
Great.
Yeah, I agree completely. You have to be able to pivot and find out what it is people are excited about, right? So we ended last season without a coach, and our quarterback was hurt. So we played 3 games without a coach or a quarterback. So, times like those, you have to figure out what is going to engage your fan base. We still had, one of the things that is beneficial to us is we still have this really awesome, cool stadium that everyone is really excited about. So how do we kind of pivot our messaging to highlight what's great? And, I talked about it a little bit, but, our social media team, right? We make fun of ourselves. We make fun of other teams a lot. And, really being able to keep people entertained when the play on the field wasn't as entertaining. And I think the other side of it is you have to be prepared and ready to pivot and capitalize when they are. When we signed our new coach Harbaugh in January, we went on sale with season tickets. The day before we announced it, we were out with all of our marketing messaging, prepared to be on every channel. We sold more season tickets than we had since 2020. So you have to be able to move in those moments when you do have the wind in your sails. But you also have to understand that that's not always going to be the case. So what are you doing to keep it moving outside of those times?
And I know I wasn't asked to opine on this question, but I'm going to do so anyways because I got a microphone in front of me. When we do these trainings with different sports organizations, we always ask the team management to identify moments of truth. Those moments when your organization has direct interaction with a fan, because that's what both folks said up here are exactly what's happening, right? If you can't control the product on the field, you have these moments of truth where fans are in your building, engaging with people, experiencing the building, all the things that are going around with you, and those moments of truth add up over the course of the day to really shape someone's opinion. And it starts the moment they leave the house to when they pull into the parking garage, the restrooms. It's really incumbent upon organizations to establish what are those moments of truth and where can we make sure that each one of those has the most positive experience for our fans that it possibly can.
Awesome. All right. Well, it's time for Q&A. So I've got a great panel here. So let's let them have it. What do we got? All right. Thanks for coming, everybody. Validation is available.
We covered sports marketing.
I'll kick it off if everybody wants to be shy to begin with. I'm going to hit you all with the same question. Give me the one most creative / successful single marketing initiative you've ever been involved with. I'm going to start right to my right here with Nikki.
So I think the one that comes to my mind, and it's creative and unique and different. So our athletic director at Arizona, she was the same athletic director that I worked with at the University of Missouri. She came in August of 2021 at the University of Missouri. Our first basketball game was in November. In the middle of the game, the first timeout happens, and she's texting me, I want to throw ice cream to the students. I said, oh, okay, we can definitely get that organized. And she was like, no, I want to throw ice cream to the students right now. I was like, okay. So I left the building, drove to the grocery store, got 1,000 ice cream bars, brought them back, and we threw them to the students. And they had the most grand time with it. And it was like a thank you for coming out and attending, and it was really awesome. Well, the next year, we did the same thing. And the next year, we did the same thing. And here at the University of Arizona, the first basketball game rolled around. It was a doubleheader. And so we did the same thing. I think it's that experience, right? It's that surprise and delight that we were able to provide to the students. Who doesn't love ice cream? It's, 8 p.m. on a Monday night in November. You probably have midterms, all the things, and so you're at a basketball game. So I think that was a really cool, just like, again, surprise and delight that we had done for students, because we're throwing ice cream at them. It ended up being that we were able to partner with a corporate sponsor on it. So, kind of growing what we were doing, but it's a small thing, but it was really fun and unique, so.
Dave, I have high expectations for your answer.
Hopefully there's ice cream involved.
Did you know that a goldfish has an attention span of 9 seconds? We got to help out on our promotion. So we did some research for the University of California, Berkeley, and we found that people who attend college football games give more to the university over their lifetime than those who don't. They are also more likely to buy season tickets and things like that going forward. And so we helped implement a freshman free, going to football games for free. And they got to do this whole event about run onto the field through the tunnel. The band was playing as all the freshmen came running out, and, the upperclassmen made fun of everybody and, those kind of stuff. But it got new students engaged with the football program in a way that they hadn't been previously. And was there a nominal loss of revenue on the front end? Yeah, okay, so student tickets aren't terribly expensive, right? So there was a little bit of a loss, so it did take a little bit to get over that, but in the end, you have a population of people who are now deeply involved in your product, and it's interesting to note that the director, the CMO of Cal Athletics at that time was, in fact, Robert Hartman.
How about that? It all comes back to Robert Hartman.
Pretty much does. The dean.
Dean Hartman. Megan.
Yeah, mine was, I was at the Philadelphia Flyers for quite a few years, and we were struggling a little bit with renewals, getting people to pay on time. Everybody wants to wait. And so one of the things that we kind of all sat around is what would incentivize somebody to get their money in, playoffs. The playoff push doesn't really start until February, so how are you getting people to want to already think about next season in November? And so we pretty much broke down every area of the arena where we could have different benefits. Could we have people sit on the bench pregame? We worked with the hockey staff to see if we could have season ticket members at postgame press conferences. So we broke down, we figured we needed about 5,000 spots for benefits during games, and so we mapped this all out and we launched it that if you renewed before a specific date, you'd have access to one of these benefits. And talking about making experiences outside of the game or making things that people really want to participate in. And I think the year before we were at about like 30% renewed by the first deadline, and that second year we were at 75% renewed by that first deadline. So just kind of all coming together and using everybody across the organization to think of the game day experience a little bit differently, other than just what was being done on the ice. So obviously to see results was also a very cool thing. So it's probably one of my favorite things that I've done.
Also, if you want like a case study on taking risks, in the Philadelphia Flyers, the launch of Gritty, their mascot, unbelievable, right?
Post my time.
Post her time. She was gritty. For
It
a
was
while.
really Megan's idea. She just doesn't want to say.
I didn't
She doesn't want
take
anything to do with
credit
it.
for
But I mean,
that.
like, Gritty was hated when he was first launched. But now he's like completely part of that identity of that team. So, sorry. I didn't have anything to do with it, but I thought it was a good point.
All right, looks like we have a brave soul who has a question.
Yeah, and actually it's more of a comment, but one thing that resonated with me is you said, find out what you do best. And this is, I would say, more for the room than the stage, but what I think racing does best, it is the absolute greatest gambling game in the world. And I'm so disappointed in the way that a lot of it is marketed. I just think there's a lot of opportunity in the skill game environment with sports betting, poker, even chess is sort of getting some buzz online, people playing for money, and racing's better than all of it. And when you said, what does racing do best? Like, that's it. It's an amazing game to play, and the horsemanship and just being a part of it all and being able to cash a big ticket is so exciting, and there's just nothing else you can do that on. So that really hit home with me, and hope it did others in the room as well.
Yeah, when's the last time someone spilled a beer all over somebody for winning a football game? It's horse racing, right, Dave?
Usually the beer spilled when something bad happens at a football game.
Right.
So.
I was gonna say, there's lots of beer spilt. I can.
There's lots of beer filled, usually by Raiders fans.
Question over here.
Yeah, I just want to thank you guys all for being here. I think this is a really important panel. Can you talk about the development of a social media user interacting with your content for the first time to then becoming a fan of your sport? Because I feel like it's pretty easy to explain to my higher-ups the short-term benefit of people seeing our product, but then they might not understand the long-term benefit of it all. So if you could kind of explain how you guys, each individual, if you could answer, if you don't mind, how you get them from that first point all the way to, being a paying customer. Thank you.
I mean, I can, especially that the thought of how do you kind of sell it up. I think, we're a family-run business, a very traditional family-run business, and so the thought of going on social media and making fun of another team was not something that they just did one day. I think it's a full plan, and it's we've said this over and over again, taking those small risks, starting small and seeing those successes, and then building upon that, seeing the reactions of how excited everyone got, seeing how many impressions people got, then being able to sell that content to partners because it got so many impressions. And so I'm a big fan of not trying to do too much and doing a little bit so that you find those little wins that get you further and further down the road to where we are now. Our social media team doesn't get approval for anything. They live on the we'll ask for forgiveness later. So, but it took a very long time to kind of build that trust with it.
I'm glad I brought up the Gritty example a second ago, because it's also a great case study on how social media creates opportunities for engagement, right? Because everybody's like, oh, boo, Gritty, we don't like Gritty. And then the Pittsburgh Penguins mascot has its own social media account. And he made some sort of comment like, yeah, whatever, with a picture of Gritty below it, because, there's a rivalry between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. And then Gritty's account responded with, sleep with one eye open, bird. And like it exploded from there. Like people in Philadelphia are like, oh, this is our mascot, right? But to that point, now you've got content, and now you've got interest, and now you've got engagement, and people are enthusiastic and happy and attitudinal, right? Because we all know how well thought out, measured social media posts get picked up. No, of course not, right? You have to be a little outrageous. You have to be open to those kinds of risks with the sleep with one eye open birds. And the fact that your social media team doesn't need to get approval on anything is probably, chef's kiss, the way to do it.
Yeah, I think social media is fun. So to that point, like, have fun with it. I think when you're trying to explain how it can benefit you, I was fortunate to grow up in a household where my father loves horse racing. I have a picture that he sent me this morning of me in a wagon at Saratoga when I was 4 years old. I've been around the sport, I understand it, but when you think about it, you're trying to reach a demographic that's, maybe new to it and doesn't understand. How are you using it to maybe educate or, just like show what the sport is about? Or how are you using it to, everyone is more likely to support when they're connected. So what are you doing to showcase and connect with, whether it's, the jockeys, whether it's the horses, whether it's just the experience in general? Like, how are you using social media to kind of push it out there and promote? And maybe that's the way you broach it, is like, this is an educational tactic. Here's all the data behind how, 18 to 30-year-olds are looking and learning and doing all these things. I had a coworker, we were talking about an event that was happening in Tucson. Literally the next day, he said to me, oh my God, I got an ad for said event that was going on. So you can use social media to plug ads, and like, you talk about, oh, I need a new vacuum and I'm going to go home today and there's going to be a Dyson ad on my thing. It's real. So using that and kind of as a leverage to be like, when you speak about it, it comes up on your phone, and that's the way of the world now.
Thank you for the panel. I've enjoyed everything. It's the most notes I've taken so far. Dave, I think one of the barriers is that a lot of people in horse racing say, well, an NFL team has more money to spend on marketing, social media, and promotions than maybe a horse racing track does. So just thinking, like, from a broad perspective, a track that races, or let's say NYRA races year-round, but at different tracks. In Kentucky, there's racing year-round, but different entities that aren't linked to each other. But let's say a track that races 6 months a year or 4 months a year, how much should they be spending on marketing, social media, like not just the personnel, but also paid ads and all that?
So it's hard to know how much to spend, right? Because you're talking about market and different media and things like that. So I'll refrain from throwing out a number like, $150,000 or something like that. But I will say that kind of format is super interesting, right? Because you do get to build excitement towards the moment when racing begins. And I think the other thing too is, and I want the other folks to chime in as well, social media is really an efficient means to be able to build that excitement, right? Because you're paying for the production of it, the creation of what that's going to be, whether that's people or time or whatever that's going to be. But if you do it well and you test it well, and it starts getting shared, not only are you getting it out into the world, but you start having your fans become your channels of distribution as well. It's like a multiplier effect, right? That whole Gritty example of sleep with one eye open, bird, it wasn't so much that they spent a lot of money to promote that particular post. It was the sharing that everybody went on. And all of a sudden, people's heads started turning. So if you look at that 3 to 6 month window before racing begins, what are the stories that you can tell? What's happening? What's going to get people interested and engaged? the whole drive to survive thing for Formula One, that sort of made the drivers human and interesting, and the storytelling aspect, that's what drove people to Formula One, not the cars going around the track. So it's a very, very winding answer to say that I don't think it's so much about budget as it is capability and skill set to be able to deliver on that.
Yeah, I think, we, depending on the campaign, we don't actually spend that much money on social media, on paid media, because really, again, the platforms are very intuitive that you're not spending money on ads that aren't successful. So you can kind of set it and, let your audience decide what they're enjoying and what they're finding the most engaging. So, that's one of the good things about having a couple pieces of creative out there, whether you're, showcasing price, or you're showcasing an athlete, or you're showcasing the building, you kind of let your audience choose what they find the most impactful, and social media just, or the paid marketing just kind of pulls that in for you, and be prepared to let it has to sit for a little bit, but for us, we change frequently because and we pivot frequently because we get to see results in real time.
I think it's the strategy, right? Like being strategic about investing your money where you need to, and it goes back to Megan kind of talks about the database of things. Like when your demographic or your database is strong in one area, like it's being strategic with investing those dollars in the areas that maybe you want to expand to or maybe are not as strong. So I think it's, again, not as much about the money, but like the strategy behind it. I also think when you talk about social media, and I'm sure Megan with the social team that they have would agree with this, Dave's point of the tweet that was viral was like a one-hitter. It was something that wasn't intentional. But it's also when you do have, the game-winning field goal, it's making sure you are the first to post it. It's making sure you are the one that gets it out there first. You don't want someone else to post your moment because that I'll use a great example. The University of Missouri had a field goal that was 61 yards, and it was like field rush, all this stuff. It was very important that we posted that moment before ESPN did or anyone else, because they're gonna get the engagement versus the University of Missouri athletic account or the football account, which is then driving people back there, which means that they're gonna then click on the link, they're gonna donate money, they're gonna buy tickets. So it's all the strategy involved, and then it's being sure that you're on the front end and not being, second to it. And
all right, we've got time for one more question.
It's more of a suggestion because I had an aha. So how about you market to the parents that, hey, this is an opportunity or a chance to have fun with your kids or connect with them, and you can market to the kids, hey, this is a really fun game. It's even more fun when you come with your parents. Go tell your parents about them, and you create win-win situation. Because the way I see it is that I don't believe there's a 5-year-old worked hard to get $800 just to buy the new iPhone to rot their own brain. Their parents gave it to them. So I believe it's an opportunity. The parents can leverage the iPhone to their advantage with something like that. And that's what I said, because I love hanging out with my dad. He's a really effing fun guy to hang out with. Effing legend. Like, I'm being respectful because this is a respectful scene, and I don't want to say profanities, but I usually say...
He'll leave that to me.
My man. Yeah, so thank you for sharing your observations, and I'm excited for your answer.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming. Appreciate it. And I'm sure those guys will be around for individual questions for a little bit.
All right, we're going to do a quick stage change here. If everybody hangs out, we'll get right into the aftercare panel as soon as we change the stage setup.